Hi, everybody.
Greetings and felicitations.
So, we are getting ready to start this panel now. Vulcans, so like our costumes, even though we're smiling. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. So, this is Vulcans, the people and their culture. And of course, we're very familiar with the Vulcans on Star Trek, and they've been in just about every iteration, every show. And we have the Vulcans who were the regulars, Spock, Tuvok, and T'Pol. So let's start with what do we know about them? The way we've always seen Vulcans is that they're emotionless, or at least suppress their emotions. They're logical, and they're known for being very intelligent. And so let's think about what are emotions exactly. So we have the definition: a natural instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationship with others. Or you can say it's instinctive or intuitive feeling as distinguished from reason or knowledge.
Now, when you were a kid, did you try to act like Mr. Spock and suppress your emotions sometimes? Because I know I did.
I did. I
It
tried
was
to,
really
yeah,
hard.
trying to emulate Spock a lot,
Mm-hmm.
yes. But the thing is, do Vulcans really like emotions? And of course, we see here, this was in the first appearance of Spock from the cage, where you actually see him smiling. So they said Spock showed desperation in this episode, the Galileo 7, and envy in Requiem for Methuselah.
And these are emotions that we don't always think about that are expressed as openly as other emotions.
Yes, and they do say that these are emotions and that Spock was accused of having.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these other things. Kolinar, through which all emotion is finally shed, and this other Vulcan word, Sathya, the structure that binds our emotions, but few of us are that perfectly Vulcan. And that was not from the movie, but it was in the script for Star Trek 2009. So Vulcans did have a way that they could get rid of their emotions completely instead of just suppressing them. And so we can go into a comparison of these different Vulcans. Spock was half human, as we know, and half Vulcan. Spock was our introduction to Vulcans, and he set the standard. Was he a typical Vulcan? We got to see how he interacted with his parents. We got to see his first Pon farr, the mating ritual. And we got to see his first time being happy in an episode where he actually got to be happy and smile. We see his deep friendships and relationships with women in a few episodes. So we got to see a lot of different sides of him.
But like you brought out, was he a typical Vulcan? He was the only one that we saw on a regular basis growing up, so we viewed him as a typical Vulcan, but being half Vulcan, half human, we can't say that he was typical.
Tuvok, of course, was more sure of himself than Spock. Spock was a complex character who struggled between his human half and Vulcan half a lot. But Tuvok was all Vulcan, not as complex, and so maybe in some ways not as interesting. And of course, Tuvok had a family. This is a picture of his wife T'Pel with Tuvok, and of course they had children. Tuvok is often contrasted with Neelix, just as Spock was contrasted with McCoy. Most of these Vulcans sort of had an opposite character to play off of on a lot of
Mm-hmm.
episodes.
Someone was extremely emotional.
Yeah, someone who was just the opposite and who would
Mm-hmm.
challenge them a lot.
Yes.
T'Pol here from Enterprise wore an illogically tight cat suit. She was known for the cat suits, and she was the first Vulcan in our Star Trek timeline who worked closely with humans. And of course, there was Spock's evolution from the original series to the first movie and then to the other movies. And you see how he changed a lot in his manners. mannerisms. And later on, he even became the wise old sage. He became the one who seemed to know a lot more and could give advice to the other people, such as Spock in 2009 and Picard in Unification. And then we can go to other Vulcans that we've seen on Star Trek. There was Surak, Vulcan's foremost philosopher of peace. And of course, two different versions of him. He was shown on the original series and then on Enterprise. And T'Pau, again shown on the original series and then on Enterprise. She is the one who helped reform Vulcan society as a Cyrenite. The Cyrenites were mentioned on Enterprise. She was described as Olive Vulcan in one package, the only person to turn down a seat on the Federation Council. She looks very different when they showed her the younger version from the older version. And I always thought the younger version kind of looks like Pat Benatar.
I love the character development of those episodes in Enterprise.
Yeah, it was great to see more development because we really didn't get to see the Vulcans as much before. And actually seeing them on their planet and watching things develop on their planet. And of course, this is Ciron from Enterprise, who basically had started a new movement on Vulcan that they all adopted to basically adopt even more of the principles of Surak. And we can go on to the Vulcan lute or the Vulcan lyre, the musical instrument that Spock played. And Tuvok also played it. And he said in the episode Fowler's Journey that's the song he played, Fowler's Journey, for his youngest son. And Uhura was the only non-Vulcan we've seen playing this instrument. And there was actually a deleted scene in which it was stated that Spock won second place in a Vulcan lute competition, with his father placing first place. I thought that was so neat, and it would have been so neat to actually see that. And it was actually called a Kyothyra, which was mentioned on Picard, which actually comes from one of the Star Trek novels, so they made it canon by mentioning it in Picard, which was really cool. There have been some Vulcan food and beverages mentioned on Star Trek. Gaspar, a Vulcan fruit that's served for breakfast, a jumbo Vulcan mollusk, Plamique soup or broth. There was Pop-Tart, Vulcan...
Not to be confused with Pop-Tart.
Yeah, Pop-Tart. No. Pop-Tart was Admiral Vanek's favorite food. There was something called red spice that was a spice native to Vulcan. And they've also talked about Vulcan brandy, mocha, tea, Vulcan port. There's a spice tea that Captain Janeway liked. There's a Vulcan tea served by Tuvok to Captain Sulu. And there was the Vulcan mint tea. And mint here, it was kind of strange. It was something that Sarek's second wife, Perrin, mentioned, that the Vulcans have something called mint, but you wouldn't really recognize it as mint. And did you know that there are some Vulcan holidays that have kind of been mentioned in passing? The Kelrek, a day of atonement, solitude, and silence, similar to something called the Festival of Toplanahath. These things were mentioned on Voyager and Enterprise. We never actually got to see them. Something called the Tal Shinar, which was a spiritual practice. Now, these are holidays that sound very Vulcan-like because they sound like serene and not something that we would do like celebrate with a party or have fireworks or anything.
Mm-hmm. No half-off sales on Vulcan?
Probably not. But there was this one, Rumari, an ancient pagan festival-like, with barely clothed Vulcans covered in grease and chasing each other. And mentioned on Voyager, they said it's no longer practiced. I actually have seen, there are some fan fiction stories where they celebrate that, if you ever wanted to read about that. There are also Vulcan rituals. The Coswan, of course we know, an adolescent Vulcan must survive alone in the desert. It's considered a test of maturity. It was mentioned, very explicitly on the animated series episode Yesteryear and in Enterprise. The Kunat Khalifi, which means marriage or challenge. The Faltor Pan, as seen in Star Trek III, this was the refusion, putting a person's katra back into their body. And there has been mention of Vulcan religion. Before the time of awakening, the time of awakening was the time when the followers of Surak stayed on Vulcan where other Vulcans left, and they're the ones who later became the Romulans. So before that time, Vulcans had a god of war and a god of peace and a god of death. And also Spock mentioned a journey to the family shrine to honor their gods. So Vulcans were actually polytheistic. And Star Trek has mentioned this, a Vulcan martial art called Susmana. It was practiced by T'Pol and by Michael Burnham. And it was actually named after Mike Sussman, who was a writer and producer for Star Trek. And of course, there's First Contact Day, April 5th, and so the day just passed. And but it will happen in 2063. The Vulcan ship Teplanahath detected the warp flight of Zephyrin Cochrane's ship in the Phoenix from the movie First Contact. And this is cute, the tender side of Vulcans, or Spock. Spock seems to like animals, we noticed. Telepathy and powers of the mind. Of course, we know that Vulcans can do the Vulcan mind meld. At first, Spock was reluctant to do it, but later did not seem to mind. Remember this, the first time Spock did the Vulcan mind meld, and he said it's never been done on a human. Oh, and then, of course, later on Enterprise, it was done on humans. So this is just an interesting way that it developed. Now, this is from the immunity syndrome. What's interesting about this is that Spock could sense the death of other Vulcans from a long distance over space, because there were other Vulcans on another ship and they all died at once, and Spock could sense it. Vulcans have this telepathy where they can feel these things. And in this episode, Sarek, and of course this is Sarek and Perrin from The Next Generation. And remember in this one, Sarek was having trouble controlling his mind and his Vulcan telepathy, because he was having these emotional drives which were due to a disease he was suffering from. But all of these emotions, these strong emotions, were being projected on the Enterprise crew. They were becoming violent and arguing with everybody, and it was all because it was projected from Sarek. And then we have this in Star Trek III, again, the refusion, where they had the ability to, or this Vulcan priestess could put Spock's katra, his spirit, back into his body. And, of course, in Star Trek V, we find out Spock's brother, Sybok, exists, and he has this power to release people of their pain. And so you see here with McCoy seeing his father, and then the scene below that of Spock being born. These were very powerful emotional scenes in their past. The one with Spock, of course, is about Spock's father saying that he was so human. And Vulcans do meditate. That's something that seems to be a part of their everyday life. T'Pol said that she does it every day. And to give you an idea of Vulcan ships, we have the Teplanahath, there's a Surak class, and there's the ship called the Surak. The Surak was actually Spock's shuttle from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But you see, they had very different designs in their ships. Now, if anyone remembers this, what is Kira Kenthal's first law of metaphysics? Nothing unreal exists. Who said logic is the cement of our civilization with which we ascend from chaos using reason as our guide? And that was Teplanahath, matron of Vulcan philosophy. And so these two questions were from the Voyage Home and the Forge episode of Enterprise. I thought this was neat because we got to meet Kirk Thatcher. If you know him, he actually does a lot of cons, but he's the one that played the punk rocker in Star Trek 4. Do you remember the guy playing the loud music and Spock did the Vulcan neck pinch on him? But he's the one who actually came up with these questions. He was actually one of the writers for the movie. And when we spoke to him at a con and he said this, like the name Kira Kentha, he made that up. It's sort of rearranging the letters of his own name, Kirk Thatcher. So that's where he got that name. And then the name Teplanahath, he said that is actually from Star Wars. Mm-hmm. It comes from the planet Hoth from Empire Strikes Back. And for the Vulcan language, we know that it hasn't been developed completely, but we've heard some words from it. Now, James Doohan created the Vulcan language spoken in Star Trek the Motion Picture, as well as the Klingon language that was spoken in the motion picture. Divtor es Smusma, Spock. Sorry, I can't quite say it with the right accent, but that means live long and prosper, as the Vulcan High Master said in the motion picture. The Vulcan dialogue and the Wrath of Khan and the Search for Spock and Enterprise was translated by the linguist Mark Okrand, who of course developed the Klingon language as well. And just to throw this in, Ponfo Moran is Vulcan for Go to Hell, which was said by Hoshi in Broken Bow. And just to give you an example of other Vulcan words, Ponfar, Kroika, Kolinar, Faltorpan, Teloth, Kazwan, Salat, Plak Tau, Talshaya, Susmana, Tahila, Shonhalak, Scythia. These were mostly words that were seen on screen. Now, Tahila was actually from the book for Star Trek the Motion Picture written by Gene Roddenberry. And then the one next to the bottom, Shonhalak, means love at first sight. I just thought that was interesting, that the Vulcans that we think of as emotionless actually have a word for love at first sight. Vulcan calligraphy. Now you see this, what Spock is wearing in the motion picture, and we've seen Vulcans wear that before. What it means is Reta, Tefar, Tapan, the Vulcan words for concept, discipline, and process. Now there is this book called Star Trek Vulcan. It's part of the Vulcan. It's part of the travel guide series. They also made one for Klingon. This book was written by Dayton Ward, and it's made just like a travel guide. It has a chapter for each major city, and it shows large bodies of water on Vulcan, which I thought was interesting because a lot of the novels depict Vulcan as being a desert planet, but this book says that there are actually bodies of water on Vulcan, and it actually lists a lot of restaurants and lodging. So if you wanted to go there, there are places you can stay and eat and sample the food. The planet Vulcan is generally considered hot, dry, and arid. And of course this picture is Gaul on Vulcan. So different places that we've heard of on Vulcan: Kir, Gaul, Real, Shikar, Mount Selea, and Vulcan's Forge. So they have mentioned some of these geographical areas. And Shikar, this is a beautiful picture from yesteryear. Tukut, Vulcan's twin planet. You see the moon in this picture. That is actually Vulcan's twin planet.
Because Vulcan has no moon.
Right, because Spock said that Vulcan has no moon, but then in the motion picture they showed something in Vulcan's sky that looked like a moon. So it was explained by saying that it's actually another planet whose orbit comes very close to Vulcan. N'ayr, this was mentioned on Discovery. In the 32nd century, we now know, by that time Vulcan and Romulus will finally be combined into one planet called N'ayr, so it's no longer called Vulcan in the 32nd century. So we have a Salat, can be wild or domesticated. As you can see, it's this large animal on Vulcan, and we know that Spock had one for a pet when he was a child.
It's like a teddy bear.
Yeah, his mother said that he said it's like a teddy bear, but then when we actually got to see it, then you're thinking,
It's huge.
There's no way that's a teddy bear. A bear, a grizzly bear maybe, but not a teddy bear. And there's the Lamatia, as seen on the animated episode Yesteryear, which is a Vulcan mountain lion. And of course there's the touching of two fingers. The first time we saw it on Star Trek was when Spock's parents did it in Journey to Babel. And then they have used it in other episodes. It's a form of affection, probably the way they kiss, but then also a way that you soothe the Pon farr, as Saavik did for Spock in Star Trek 3.
And what do we use it as?
We use it like saying grace before a meal. There are Vulcan games, of course, 3D chess, which is not Vulcan, but it's something Spock likes to play. And we saw Tuvok playing Kalto. And Vulcans are often considered arrogant and egotistical. Of course, we had T'Pring and Sarek, especially on Discovery. Sarek was very arrogant. And of course, the Vulcan that was on Deep Space Nine. They are known to think of themselves as being superior to humans. And this is Trelane, and a quote, "Oh, Mr. Spock, you do have one saving grace after all. You're ill-mannered."
I love Trelane.
Yeah, so they have their own view of Vulcans. And of course there are Vulcan hybrids. Saavik in Star Trek 2, Kirstie Alley's version of Saavik, the script said that she's half Romulan and half Vulcan, even though Saavik in Star Trek 3 was more clearly all Vulcan. But Spock is a hybrid, and then we had the baby Elizabeth that was T'Pol and Trip's baby that someone had just put their DNA together. And then Lorian was also a son of Trip and T'Pol in an alternate timeline. And then, of course, Tuvix, the transporter accident, combining Tuvok and Neelix. So the Vulcan nerve pinch. Now we know about this. And first we have a picture of Leonard Nimoy. He explained at one time as saying that Vulcans have energy coming from their hands so they can do the nerve pinch.
When we were growing up, that's what it was.
That's the version of it.
It was viewed that only Vulcans could do it.
Yes. And Leonard Nimoy actually invented it. There was a scene where he was supposed to fight Kirk and from the enemy within, so it was the evil Kirk. But Leonard Nimoy thought that Spock wouldn't do the traditional type of fighting, so he came up with this elegant nerve pinch. So here we see Spock doing it. Of course, he did it lots of times. 7 of 9 trying to do it. And Picard actually did it on... of course, this is Tim Russ who played Tuvok, but it's not Tuvok in that episode. And McCoy unsuccessfully doing it. It's generally believed that Picard, the reason he could do it is because he had been in that mind meld with Sarek, so he probably was able to do it because part of Sarek was still in him through the mind meld. But then McCoy, you think McCoy had Spock's Katra, so why wasn't he able to do it? Well, maybe he's just too emotional. And of course there was Bendii syndrome, which was the disease that Sarek had. It's something that affects Vulcans usually over 200 years old. And it's kind of like Alzheimer's for humans. So the Idic symbol you see here that Spock is wearing, and the Vulcan salute, two very recognizable, iconic things from Vulcans. So Idic, which stands for infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and that phrase was first stated on the animated episode The Infinite Vulcan, Not Is There in Truth No Beauty. Now the symbol was actually introduced in Is There in Truth No Beauty, the episode, and the way they said it, they said something about infinite combinations, but they never said the exact words, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. So, and the actual Vulcan word for Idic is Kolut Shan. And here we see Michael Burnham, and you see that she's wearing the Idic symbol on her collar. And this is from Star Trek II. Let me see if I can do the pointer. You can kind of see the Idic symbol in the background here. The picture's a little dark, but
Yeah, if
it's
you get
there.
the Blu-ray version, you could see it. The widescreen Blu-ray, it's the clarity is so much more so than the standard versions.
Yes, so it was there in the background in Spock's quarters. So other fascinating facts. Oh, and of course this picture is from a blooper. Spock with the Tootsie Roll pop. That was something because Leonard Nimoy always carried it around to suck on to keep his lips moist. And there was one scene where he flubbed a line and then he just put the pop in his mouth. So someone got a picture.
And if you're a prop collector and you get original series tricorders, you'll notice that some of them have lollipop residue in there because Leonard Nimoy would put the pops inside his tricorder. Like, isn't that crazy?
Okay, like finding candy in something, yeah. Or like a kid getting their sticky fingers on everything.
Mm-hmm.
From Voyager, even though the picture's not from Voyager, but on Voyager we learned that Vulcan literature had no demons, and there is a Vulcan funeral dirge that Neelix found in the Vulcan archives. Vulcans were the first alien species created for Star Trek by Gene Roddenberry.
And they're originally supposed to be red.
Yeah, he wanted the skin to be red. But a lot of TV was still in black and white back then, and they said the red on his skin wouldn't show up as well on a black and white screen. Vulcans worship peace above all, something McCoy said in Return to Tomorrow. And Vulcans are vegetarians. According to D.C. Fontana, of course, she was one of the writers of Star Trek and did a lot of development for the Vulcans. She wrote a letter to Spockanalia, which was a fan publication, and she said Spock's family or last name is actually this. And I saw this in a Best of Trek book when I was a child, and I made it my own way to pronounce it. Extempers quizzent wolfba. That's how you pronounce it. It takes care of all the letters, okay? And then you can see exactly what she said in her letter. Both his mother and father have been married only once to each other. Spock is an only child. There are absolutely no other siblings. I have rejected Spock's last name as Extempers quizzent wolfba. I just like to throw this in just because, even though it isn't canon, but it's still something interesting. The original idea for Spock was that he wouldn't have any siblings, and of course later on they changed that. So in Amok Time, the first episode of the second season, by this time you can see how popular Spock was. This was the episode that first had a trip to Vulcan, the Vulcan salute, and the saying, live long and prosper. So definitely more things that we learned from this episode and showing how popular Spock was, that they created more of the Vulcan culture. And of course we know it was Leonard Nimoy. He came up with the Vulcan salute. He got it from a Jewish hand signal.
I remember losing my mind when I was a kid watching this episode for the first time because it introduced all these amazing things.
It was so great to learn more about Spock and
Of course,
Vulcans.
yes.
Now, we could just have some quotes from Spock because he said a lot of neat things. I have been and always shall be your friend.
I cried in the movie theater when I was a kid when that
Oh,
happened.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God, yeah.
You may find that having is not so pleasing a thing after all as wanting. It is not logical, but
Hmm.
it is often true. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Or the one.
I object to intellect without discipline. I object to power without constructive purpose.
Amazing.
Yeah, and of course we could go on. He said a lot of
Hmm.
great things. Volcanisms: live long and prosper, peace and long life. Illogical. Fascinating. Great things that are just words that are easily recognizable as attributable to Vulcans. And we will say there are some Vulcan myths. Can Vulcans lie? Is there a Vulcan death grip? Do they only have sex once every 7 years? Conniving like T'Pring or rebel like Sakona. This picture is another Vulcan named Sakona who was actually a member of the Maquis. So Ponfar, the time of mating, they said it's a very private matter, neurochemical imbalance akin to madness, occurs in both males and females. And something else I found out about this. Gene Roddenberry came up with the idea of the time of mating for Vulcans, and this is from the book, The Making of Star Trek. It's not really 7 years for all Vulcans, as it was mentioned in a mock time that it comes every 7 years. This was Gene's original idea for it. It occurs less often if the Vulcan is separated from his people, but occurs more often if he is living among his people. So that is something interesting, and they did not stick with that.
Hmm.
What we've seen in canon is that they did just make it strictly every 7 years for Vulcans.
This book is amazing for Star Trek fans to see the roots of Gene Roddenberry's genius and how things developed.
Definitely. Spock and T'Pring were bonded when they were 7 years old in an arrangement by their parents. So this is T'Pring when she was a little girl. And just to show you this, of course, the famous Spock cosplayer, this is Paul Forrest as Spock. And of course, that's me, Kavura, and our friend Leela, the Klingon. This picture was taken at DragonCon. And of course, there are Vulcan toys. The shuttle, and of course, the Spock action figures. And this other picture is N'ayr and Kavura. This is us with a little teddy bear. That is called Spock Bear. One of our friends has that and took it on the Star Trek cruise where this picture was taken.
Yeah, Spock has just turned into be the face of Star Trek. That's what most people think of when they think of Star Trek.
He is all about it. So this quote from Surak, or Surak, as they called him on Enterprise. I am pleased to see that we have differences. May we together become the greater than the sum of both of us. So, nice quote from Surak there. And so now we just get to, again, we are N'ayr and Kavura. We have two podcasts, StarPodTrek, all about Star Trek, and StarPodLog, which is about classic sci-fi and fantasy. And this is a picture of us as Andorians there.
And we are on the USS Athena, which is a Starfleet command club.
And Starfleet International, we're a member of the USS Werner von Braun, based in Huntsville. And of course, the Klingon Assault Group, our ship is the XLV Predator in Nashville. And so the Predator is a Romulan ship, part of the Imperial Xeno Legion of CAG. And we also have a meetup group in Nashville where we have monthly meetups, viewing parties, dinner with friends or field trips, whatever we can think of to get together with fans in person.
And we do have monthly viewings at our place. And anyone who is visiting Music City, give us advance notice. We'll have you over. You'll have dinner with us, party with us. We do it every month. We're having it actually tomorrow night. We've had someone come as far as Canada when they were visiting Nashville, join our group, which was pretty awesome. So we're very welcoming to everyone else in CAG. If you're in the city, let us know. We'll get together with you.
And that is it for our presentation. So, and of course, where to find us, we are StarPod Log on iTunes, Blogger, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We have our YouTube channel, StarPod Log and StarPodTrek. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. And we're also part of the network Holosuite Media, which is a Star Trek network of podcasts.
You also have a podcast, Ladies Trek Library, where you talk about all Star Trek books.
Right, Star Trek book podcast. So I think we can open it up now and see if we have any questions.
It is open.
Okay. Or if not, then we can end it now.
Does anyone have any questions for them?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Make talk still. So, I had a question. I was looking for your input on something. It made me think. We're going through. So throughout the series, certain information about Vulcans in relation to alcohol. We hear they don't drink except making exceptions, and occasionally that they just completely immune to it. However, we both port. So why do you think they do create alcoholic beverages?
Well, if you notice throughout the entire Star Trek series, there's idiosyncrasies, things that don't line up. Writers don't always watch every episode or memorize every episode to the point that we fans do. So I'm going to chalk that up to a flaw. I can't imagine it's going to be a non-alcoholic port. That would and port itself is from Portugal. I mean, even that, so maybe it's a Vulcan knockoff of port, right? I mean, you can't have tequila anywhere else but Jalisco, Mexico. You can't even have in other regions of Mexico. You know, liquor laws, wine laws, everything is labeled as such. You know, all champagne is sparkling wine, but not all sparkling wine is champagne. So when you bring up Vulcan port, we, as far as in our fans' minds, we could say like, well, this is the non-alcoholic version maybe of what Vulcan's real port is like. That make sense?
Oh, and drink was in Requiem for Methuselah. Spock did say, "I'll have a drink," and then McCoy said something like, "Well, do you want to Kirk? Do you want to drink Vulcan on your hands?" Because apparently they're really susceptible to it.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to see what your on the subject was.
Yeah, I guess you could go either way with it. What do you think about it? Does that make sense?
I see people are typing questions.
I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see it.
Sorry, I'll let that go.
Let's
What are
see.
your thoughts on Cyranites?
All right, here we go.
This is from
this is the nerdy Vulcan now. All right.
From Captain Core Dan. Yeah, what happened on Enterprise when they introduced the Cyranites, you know, that was basically for the purpose of fixing the Vulcans, because the Vulcans all through the first through third seasons of Enterprise had been so different from the traditional Vulcans that we already knew. And so they invented the Cyranites to say that now Vulcans are going to change from here on out and be more like the ones that we've seen before, the Vulcans who think it's okay to do mind males and so forth. And
there's a lot of controversial things, especially early on in the Enterprise TV series. By the way, we love Enterprise, but there were some things where you had to go, I don't really know about that.
Okay, so Second Lieutenant Drana asked, when do these celebrations fall on the Terran calendar, if we know. No, I don't
But
think
it was
it's
never brought up.
it's never been stated where they fall. I think that the fans could just designate a day for them. I think it would be great to have a day of just like spiritual, inward looking and meditating. That would be cool for some of us.
And we're Star Trek book collectors, and I can't recall in any volumes anything brought up like that. No. Yeah, that would be great if it was.
If I may follow up on that, as far as Klingon holidays go, there was mentioned in the book's holiday called More Tech, but it was not specified as to when it's celebrated. So I contacted the author, Michael Jan Friedman, to ask him, and he gave me carte blanche to set it where I pleased. So the 1st of July through the 4th of July is the More Tech celebration.
That's great. So it ends with fireworks here on Earth.
I see. Yeah.
That's great.
And Michael Jan
it.
Friedman is a great writer.
Yeah, we've met him before, and he's down to earth, and he's a fan. I think that's one of the best things about the Star Trek writers. Pete Candido, I mean, he's on here. I mean, they all absolutely love Trek. They have a passion for it, and they elevate the fandom.
And Captain Cordon said, "Thank you, lovely Vulcan clothes, and I think young T'Pau is so cute." Yeah. She is cute. She was really almost too cute for a Vulcan.
Oh yeah, about the Leonard Nimoy statue. Yes, everything that we do in Trek is our life. We met at a Star Trek convention. We had our first date after a Star Trek video shoot. We got engaged within a temple of Athena that was in Mourns for Adonai. That was the Star Trek link to it. We got married at a Star Trek convention, and for our anniversary, we went to the Star Trek cruise. Then we went to the birthplace of Leonard Nimoy, Boston. So yes, Leonard Nimoy Memorial is going to be in Boston, and a piece of trivia for that as well, because the Leonard Nimoy tribute, which is going to be the Vulcan salute that they're looking at constructing there in front of the Museum of Science. Leonard Nimoy had such a strong relationship with the Museum of Science that he narrated a movie that was going on for, I think, 30 years, an introductory movie, when you went to the Museum of Science there. So it's not like they're just cashing in on Leonard. No, Leonard had strong connections to that museum up there. So we plan on going there when that happens, absolutely. I think that's incredible. We have Janeway statue. We have a Kirk statue. The next one's going to be Leonard Nimoy. And there's rumors that in, Juneau, Alaska, they want to build a Riker statue.
Yeah, that would be neat too.
Yeah. And someone's actually talking about even having an O'Brien statue in Ireland. Star Trek statues around the world sounds great.
Okay, and Second Lieutenant Drana said, "We're fortunate in Canada to have 2 truly non-alcoholic wine brands. With permission, I'll share links."
Yes, yeah. Well, that's quite a few of them out of California as well. I've been to in Canada, I've been to the wine region there, where the ice wines are, the Niagara region. Absolutely fantastic. I've taken tours of those facilities. I used to be in wine and spirit sales. I've been to quite a few wine regions around the world. Does anybody else on their ships have Vulcans, or is everybody primarily strictly Klingons? Because we do everything. We Klingon cosplay, Vulcan, Andorian, Romulan. Spock have children?
Yeah, it was hinted in the novels that he and Saavik have a child.
Yes.
Due to her helping
Star
him
Trek 3.
with his issue in 3. It was never mentioned in any shows. I can't find the sighting.
We were just talking about that recently.
Yeah.
You were not a fan of that.
I was not a fan of Saavik and Spock getting together. In the novels, they actually had the two of them get married, and I just thought Spock is more of a mentor to Saavik. He's much older than her, and it doesn't seem reasonable that they would have kind of relationship where they would get married. But as far as but as far as having a child due to her helping him in Star Trek 3, that's an interesting notion. And they actually were going to do that in Star Trek 4. It was in the script that the reason she stayed on Vulcan is because she was pregnant with his child. But they never went with that. It never appeared on screen that it happened. So I would like to say it didn't happen.
I remember that opened up a can of worms when that was revealed that was in the script.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
What? Yeah.
I think Spock's legacy, instead of having a child, it would be more of his work on being on Enterprise.
Yes.
Yeah, and as an ambassador, those type of things.
Are there any other questions?
I was gonna say.
So we got the link for the wines. Okay.
There you go.
Protech was talking.
Oh yeah, I was gonna
We
say
only
I've
hear
done
you.
Andorian. I haven't done Vulcan, but I have an Andorian cosplay, and I've actually taken a picture with you guys at Starbase Indy.
Oh, of course,
Oh, right.
absolutely, yes. Starbase Indy is an awesome convention. I said that's like the old creation conventions from decades ago. You know, it's intimate enough where you get to know people, but awesome enough that you can have fun. I mean, it has that happy medium.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good to see you again. How have you been?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, and the Klingon room party there is epic.
Oh yes. Oh,
It's
yes.
one of those things like, wow, this is a lot of thought and passion involved in it. It's a lot of fun.
Indeed it is. And great panel, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. We actually did this panel at Starbase Indy too,
That's where we
with a few
introduced
changes.
it.
Yeah.
Well, are there any more questions?
We see dots, so someone's typing.
I didn't have any questions. I was just gonna throw in with the question about their species. I have a Romulan character myself, and we have a couple of different on our ship, but the one that came to mind was a half Klingon, half Vulcan.
That's great. If you remember the FOSSA games from the 80s, there were a lot of those crossovers, like genetic manipulation, things like that. I mean, that was before the Next Generation. Our whole Star Trek world were the comic books, the novels, and the FOSSA games. And I mean, that's near and dear to our hearts. And that was something that was explored in there in the FOSSA. You two be at Starbase Indy 2021. We plan on it. And we'll be at Star Trek Las Vegas as well. So if anybody else is going there, we look forward to seeing you in Vegas. And at Dragon Con.
So I'm going to toss out a shameless plug.
Yes, the Klingon Romulan fusions. They were awesome.
I'm going to toss out a shameless plug because my panel at 2 o'clock, or what is it? 2 o'clock Central Time. I'm doing the panel on Star Trek and the comics and other media. And it will be a trip down memory lane to the Star Trek in the 70s, 80s, and the comics and everything.
Well, sure. Yeah, we have almost every issue ever produced. We're huge comic book collectors, and it's amazing, especially the Peter David works from the 80s. George Perez that did the covers, and when right after Star Trek 2. I mean, there's some gems there. We keep up with the new ones. What do you think about year 5?
I haven't read and I haven't bought any comics for years, but
Oh, you got to read year 5. It's fantastic.
It's a great series.
Yeah.
okay.
Finish, right? The last episode is like next month or something. The last.
So we just went to the comic store this Wednesday. We got issue 20, and
Yeah, I think they're ending
it's
that
wrapping
one.
up.
Yeah.
It's wrapping up. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a notification. There's like a final like summary wrap up issue coming.
Yes, exactly. And the we keep up with the Orville comics too. It's close to the series. I mean, the Orville I think is closest thing to Trek we have now on TV. Yeah,
And
so that
someone
that-
else is going to Dragon Con. Great.
That's great. I mean, that's the ground zero for Klingon for years. It's been ground zero for Klingon and CAG representation, especially that big photo shoot on Sundays.
Hey guys, hopefully we'll be able to meet you at Starbase Indy. But I want to
Nice.
say, back on the FASA material, back in '90, one of my crew members here in Chicago portrayed a Romulan Klingon fusion. Unfortunately, the only difference was his ears. His uniform was Imperial Klingon, but for a fully non-Klingon, he liked walking around with a whip instead of a disruptor, and he really played it to the hilt. So it would be nice to see more of the Klingon Romulan fusions resurrected from the FASA era. I agree on that one.
Even that verbiage, the Imperial Klingons, I loved it. It made sense.
Well, I'm one of the I'm one of the old I'm one of the old timers back in the '89, '91 era, so I'm used to that verbiage as opposed to everybody else.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, right behind us, we have every single FASA thing they ever produced, and it's great reading.
Well, there was an episode of TNG that had the teenage girl that was half Klingon, half Romulan in Birthright.
Yeah.
So it's been seen on screen too.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, FASA had the idea before that.
Yes,
Yeah.
like Baio. Yes, exactly.
Well, it's 12 o'clock, our time, so I think it's time for the next panel.
Yeah,
Thank you,
were
everyone,
gonna-
for joining us.
Thank you.
It's truly been our pleasure. Check us out. Follow our Facebook group pages, StarPodTrek, StarPodLog. Interact with us online on everything, right? Twitter.
Yeah, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
Everything,
and Reddit.
yes. And if you have any questions about costuming, we'd be happy to help you out there. We're known as the Mego Klingons as well. We're huge Star Trek toy collectors, so we costume in that aspect. So, hey, live long and prosper.